push for the economy, but of course also sentiment is beginning to rise. At what pace is that kind of transformation going to happen to be able to put Uganda in a position to be sufficiently self-sustainable in terms of running the economy? Joining us to give us perspective on this is Francis Samuhire, an economist at Makerere University Business School. Many thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
First things first, the budget is going to be read. It's the latest in a series of speeches from government officials, including the president. His third in a fortnight, and of course, many say predictably awaited. Others no longer anticipate it because they think he won't be giving specific solutions. But the budget has been out for a long time. Reading it today, to some people might feel like something that is new, but we've had it for the last 3 months. It has been digested. As an economist, what are your key points?
Thank you, Mr. Higinyi. It's important, that actually it's not only Uganda but the whole region, the whole of East African region. All of them are reading their national budget speeches. But as we put it, it came out long time ago, so we had the figures, and we've been able to dissect it. So the national budget is a very important tool, that directs or makes a government actually achieve its economic objectives. So it's very important. And it is designed that way. But, how you run your national budget is, what is going to tell if you're on the right track, for example, Uganda, if you're on the right track, let's say, to achieve your vision, let's say 2040, or even achieve the goals of national development plans. So, it gives you a picture. And as you've put it, when you talk about the private sector and other players, whether they are going to benefit from this, I'm afraid I'm not going to lie to you. When you look at even the previous national budgets and look at the one of this, financial year, it is the same script.
That's right.
It is the same script. When you look at the locations, it is the same script. So, and yet, as I've told you, the budget in details should be able, to make you achieve economic objectives. You're talking about, employment opportunities creation. How many are we going to create? Have you made that forecast? Last time, the forecast was showing that we're supposed to, create about 30,000 jobs. Are there statistics showing that actually that was met? This time, they're not even talking about the number of jobs that are going to be, created. Are you talking about, income distribution? Income equality, that's what you're talking about. You're trying to close the gap between the rich and the poor. So, yeah, but to jump specifically to your question about the private sector, when you look at the national budget itself, when you look at the debt payment, it is taking over 47.8%
of the total budget.
Yes. And of that,
debt repayment and rebalancing.
Debt repayment.
Yeah.
And out of that, you have a staggering amount of about 6.9 trillion shillings in domestic areas. So tell me, that is a pure debt certificate for the private sector. 6.9 trillion shillings in domestic areas. That is suffocating.
And there isn't a clear plan that is going to be.
There is no plan, because as I've told you, this is the same script. When you look at the last financial, financial years, it's the same thing. So if you're not really paying these domestic areas, first of all, let's first put aside that you're supposed to be supporting this private sector.
Yeah, the private sector.
Yes, but even what they are providing to, what they are giving in terms of their service, you're not paying for them. Yeah. You're not paying them back. Even when you pay them back, you're not even putting interest. You keep on holding the money. So it is really absurd. And when I see, key decision makers in this country saying that, we are trying to fight poverty, we are trying to do this, it's just mere talking.
It's a bit of a joke.
Start by supporting the private sector, by paying it back its money. So that's what I'm telling you, that when you look at this, it's too bad for the private sector. And the other point I want to make is when you look at, for example, the financing of this budget. The tax man's collection is about 25 trillion. Then you have about 2.5 in terms of grants.
That's projected.
Yes, and then you have about 7.1 trillion that is going to be borrowed domestically. Last financial year, it was about 8 billion. This time it has reduced, but still 7.1 trillion.
It's a significant amount of money.
It's a very huge figure.
The percentage is really huge.
Meaning that who is going to lose out of this? Still the private sector. The government has already indicated, showing this projection of 7.1 trillion is sending a signal to the commercial banks and other credit institutions out there that I'm coming for this amount of money. And these commercial or financial a financial institution, they want to lend the government, not you, the private sector. So the government is sending a signal. Put that man aside. I'm coming. Even I might come for more than what I've shown. So that shows you how the private sector is really the biggest victim of this national budget for this year.
That's a very grim assessment of how things are. A stimulus package was very much anticipated after the lockdown that was slapped on Ugandans and, of course, most of the countries across the globe. In this particular budget, there is no hint on a stimulus package, nor a mechanism that is supposed to help out to allow most of these SMEs, mostly, to be able to recoup a bit of some of the money that they've lost, but most importantly to shoulder the hardships that they are facing. Most of these hardships that are being transferred to the average Ugandan in terms of high commodity prices. Where exactly should we move according to the dictates of economics, if at all the Minister for Finance and the President were to take in your advice?
The previous, when COVID-19 pandemic came in, of course, we saw the government trying to do, come up with some measures, put money in the development bank, Uganda Development Bank, to hope there's the same is, but which we did not even see the results coming out. But at least you could see that on the national budget, some amount was put aside, But as you're saying, in this, national budget, there is nothing like to cater for the struggling private sector, whether you're talking about SMEs, talk about the urban informal sector, which actually contributes over 42% to the gross domestic product. All of them have been left behind, and you know how significant they are, as I've talked about those statistics. So it's a shame. As I've told you, this national budget is a tool that tells you that you're on the right track or you're off track. And as I can tell you, we are off track. Unfortunately, it is the same script. There's nothing new. You still have high levels of fiscal indiscipline, because when you look at the sector allocations, as I've said, your debt repayment is taking over 47% of the budget. Then you have security and governance, which is taking about 14%. Do not be fooled, or anyone out there should not be deceived that health or education has been allocated more resources. Not at all. Not at all. This time, as they did last time, was to just combine health and education, and now they've even put gender, and then you have a parish development model. They have compiled it as one item. That's what they are calling human capital development, but still the allocations there have not been increased. When you talk about agro-industrialization, this time you're not looking at the agricultural sector. They are calling it agro-industrialization. They have only allocated 1.2 trillion shillings. That accounts for about 2.6% of the allocation.
Yeah, nearly 3.
Well, some key decision makers have come out to say that agriculture is not that important, and you can see it from the national budget. And
agriculture is actually very, very important.
It's a shame. You're talking about a sector that employs over 68% of Ugandans. A sector that contributes over 23% of national GDP. But when it comes to allocating resources there, we are not increasing resource allocations. Instead, we are thinking of, to keep on importing even the agricultural inputs, talk about palm oil from Indonesia. So that is the kind of situation, and that is the picture we are in.
Yes, according to the executive director at the Federation of Small and Medium Enterprises, John Walgembe, quoted by one of the newspapers, the Daily Monitor, I should be very specific, says that focus should be on reducing inflation. We've already hit 6.3%. And the other day, the deputy governor of the Bank of Uganda said inflation is to peak in the second quarter of the next financial year. Now, SMEs are already grappling with high levels of inflation. Of course, across the globe, globe, inflation is high. The United States alone, it's staggering into figures that haven't been seen in the last 70 years. The budget speech today, of course, doesn't offer any warm words to be able to have the likes of Walu Gembe and his ilk within the small and medium enterprise sector to have some bit of confidence. Is there a realistic approach to curbing inflation, especially within the framework of how things are going on across the region and indeed the globe?
I would like to put it clear that while the global economy is suffering and we are about to get into recession, as we put it, all countries are facing challenges, high inflation. In USA it is about 8%, the highest in 40 years. Here we are at 6.3% headline inflation. Just, in January it was about 2.3. But, inflation is something that is broad and has different types. The kind of inflation US is facing is not what we are facing. Because, first of all, we have the same factors, but then there's a difference between what we are facing and what they are facing. How does that play out? First of all, I'll tell you that when you look at USA during the pandemic, during the first phase of the pandemic, they gave out a lot of stimulus checks, and this was direct cash. So in other words, they pumped a lot of money into the economy. So the people out there have money. At first, actually, they were depositing this money direct into the banks, meaning that most of them, they were okay. So they had first deposit these, checks. But as we saw, for example, Russia invading Ukraine and prices, especially in gasoline, increasing, now they started to withdraw the money. So now there's a lot of money in circulation, which has pushed that inflation, and that's why they are reacting by actually increasing interest rates, which is not the case here. In our economy, there is no money. You have just a small group of people who don't even make 1% of Uganda's population that actually have a lot of money. How are they getting the money? Of course, through corruption. You're talking about a country where you're losing about $2.8 billion per year just in corruption. So, but the type of inflation we have here is mainly imported inflation, and then structural inflation, and the depreciation of the Ugandan shilling. Because if the Ugandan shilling loses value, if it depreciates, that means that imports are going to become expensive, and this will go to the main, to the last or the final consumer in terms of, price increases. So we need to differentiate, and once we know the kind of or the type of inflation we have, then that's when we can come up with the measures that can solve this challenge. In the short term, these are the measures the government can do, and I will say this in capital letters. Please do. Subsidization, import subsidization is important in the short run. I'm not saying that we are going to maintain it for long, no, just in the short term. You have over 1.8 million households who have been pushed into extreme poverty and vulnerability. They are on drip. You need to come up with measures to first make these people actually survive. Few people there cannot survive. So you need to do import subsidization, but on a short-term basis. Even if it means actually reducing tax, yes, this should be done on a short-term basis. But in a long term, we should look at, a restrictive government spending, a restrictive fiscal policy. Yeah, that is critical in curbing the leakages in public expenditure Very critical. Systems. And we would have seen this if we were running under normal circumstances, or if we had a government that is really, trying to help its citizens out of this situation. We should be seeing this from the national budget. So when we talk of a restrictive fiscal policy, here you're looking at, practicing high levels of fiscal discipline. You're trying to put resources where they are needed. You're putting resources in productive sectors like agriculture, health, and education. And you go ahead to cut unnecessary expenditures. We have a bloated government. Big in size, we have over 170 ministries, departments, and agencies. You have how many districts, parishes, you have how many RDCs, you have a big civil service, cartel. All these people come at a cost. That's why you're going to find out that if you go into details, over 21 trillion shillings just goes on recurrent expenditure. And this is not development expenditure, but salaries and wages and non-wages, expenditure.
All right, Mr.
shows you the
Muhire, we
picture
are
where we are.
constrained for time. I would like to ask you a very first question. The government has lauded the parish development model as one that is going to allow the average Ugandan have a little bit of money to be able to spend, but most importantly, how? And it is focused mainly on helping the average Ugandan be able to engage in income-generating activity. The model itself doesn't cater, or seems not to cater, for anybody who is within the sectors as outlined in the small and medium enterprises. Do you see the parish development model delivering the kind of results that the government is touting?
I don't believe that right away from the start. I've never believed that the parish development model, as they call it, as a silver bullet, that is the one that is going to take Ugandans out of poverty. That is not going to happen. We have a government that is good at talking and promising. These are masters when it comes to promising. But when it comes to reality, it's a different case. You're calling something a silver bullet. You're saying that finally we've brought very many programs to end poverty that have not worked. But this time, after 36 years, this is going to work. I can assure it is not going to work, because when you look at the national budget, how much has been allocated to that parish development model? You're talking about only 1 trillion. How many parishes do we have in this country? So divide that money. This is like, just, dropping, just a drop in an ocean. It's not going to help. It's not significant.
All right, that's very interesting. Of course, the national budget reading is expected later today. That is at Kololo. And of course, the president will be making his third speech in a fortnight. Many, like I said in the beginning, highly anticipated in some circles, but predictably awaited by most, who say that it won't change very much. In delivery of speeches like the budget, and most importantly after that the president does speak, what kind of tone must the president use? Should he completely stay away from 1986?
As a politician, and of course the president, he has to speak, he has to try to give hope to people. But the challenge is that, as I've told you, when looking to the actions, for example, basing on the national budget, there's nothing much. There are no solutions.
All right. Okay, that's a very grim assessment, and of course, but as media, we shall be, of course, amplifying those messages and bringing you the live broadcast of the reading of the national budget. That does it for Take Note. Many thanks, Francis Muhire, for the insight and perspective. It will do it for Take Note and Morning at NTV today. I'm Chris Higenyi, and on behalf of my colleague, have yourselves a lovely day.
It's here, the ITEL P38. Take a step faster into the new world with the new ITEL P38 smartphone.
When you buy Rigo Paints Premium Emulsions, open and pick out the